work on our to-do input component, which is an HTML file right now, and let's enclose the to-do component in a container. And a container is, if you see, the style is flexing into the middle position. I mean that it's in the center. And the input container will need an Angular ng model, which the container must be binded to, right? So it should be to do. The type of the input should be text, and a placeholder should be of enter to do. And we are going to give this a class of to do input. If you want to go through the styles, you can see the CSS file. I'll be giving the link to the whole code in the description, and we are going to use a disabled attribute for this. And for this, the to if the button should be disabled when the button should be disabled when the to do is going to be empty, right? So is equal to and empty. And another thing is that the type should be of button, the class should be of button, and I usually use this method of bootstrap, but the classes are a bit by myself. And it should have a event of when the click event is clicked, it should call a onSave to do method inside the TS file, and the name should be save to do for it, right? And let's just get the closing tag, and let's just format it a bit. I like changing these things so it may be a bit more usable. Now for now, let's go into our to do component file, and over here when the let's first make the to do string, which was binded to our input, right? And we declared a method of onSave. No, I mean we called a method onSave. So let's make a method onSave to do over here. And what we want to do is let's firstly go through what we are going to do. Now what we are going to do is let's go to a Medium article and over here. So this is our step. So when the add to do button is clicked, this is a child component right inside a parent component. When the add button is clicked, let's go to this child parent component communication, right? So when this is clicked, the data input is sent into to the parent. And what to do this, we use emitters in Angular and event binders, right? So what we want to do is emit this, and it should be the event should be listened inside the parent component, and it should add the to do input which is clicked over here. And like it should make a list, which should be further we should be like making this stuff of to-do list, and that is going to happen in the to-do list. So for now, what we are going to do in Angular, what we want is an output. So if you want to emit or send the data to the parent, what you need to have is output, right? And we should name this on to do add, and it should be let's just add output over here. We are going to need an event emitter over here. So this is of, since we are using TypeScript, we can give it a data type of event emitter and cast it to any, right? So it could event and emit a data of any right now. It, yes, we can make it a string, but for now let's string. So let's just disable this. Okay, and this on to do add, and let me just first chain it like this so it seems a bit easy to read, and emit, and we what we need to do is emit this. So whatever is entered in the input string, it'll emit this thing to the parrot, and the empty string won't be emitted because we are disabling it over here. So the button won't work if the event is. So let's see how this is working. All right, what's the problem? Oh, right. So this error means that for ng model to work over here, what you need to do is in app.module, you need to add a form module, right? So in the imports, you can write forms module. Basically, form modules will only work for example, we are referencing the template over here, referencing it over here, so it should only work over here if it's imported. Import forms module from at Angular forms, I guess, yeah. Right. So let's see if it's working right now. Let's refresh this. Awesome. It's working right now. So whatever I enter over here, this button won't work right now because we need to listen to the event, right? So what we need to do is inside our app component, inside over app component HTML file, the event that we emitted was on to do add, like over here, on to do add. We need to listen to this event and do something with it, and the event will give us input tags. So let's on to do add is handle to do add, right? And give us a property of event, and sorry, let's work this thing out in our or let's remove this title for now, and uh, and what we need to do is we needed to make a list, right? So let's make a list over here. So to do's any is equal to yeah. So we made a list over here, and now we need to call the method handle to do add, right? And to do will be of type string, and it should return nothing, and let's just give it a space over here. And this dot to do's dot push, what's going on with this? Right, so I guess IntelliJ is installed over here, so I might be having these issues because of that. Other than that, it should work. Okay, so this part is done. What we did is basically we entered input to do in our input list as in our input to do input component, and when the add to do is clicked, if it is not disabled, the event is emitted, which is listened by the parrot, and it is basically pushing that input, that text input to or to do list, right? So uh, uh, before further going into this part, let's do the same thing in the React as well, right? So let's go to our React React to do input, right? React to do input. Right. So let's go to our React to do. Right. So let's go over here and so if you want to, what we did in our Angular uh, project is we wrote everything or in our HTML file. To do the same thing, you need to do this stuff in our JSX file. So the difference in JSX file is, for one thing, is you can't write class over here. You need to write class name over here. So that's one thing that's different in JSX in React is this. So other than that, everything seems to be same almost. The type should be of text. The placeholder will be enter to do same as before. The class name should be of to do input, and then again, if you want to go through all the classes, you can go through the CSS file, the styles file, because I won't be going through. This isn't about styling things in this application. Maybe for another tutorial we'll be going through that. And prop start value, and so what's prop start value? So if you remember, in our Angular app, what we did is binded the to do with our the input by using ng model. And in React, we basically, what happens is this props property is sent from the parent. So that is binded that way. So we won't be having any property overhead inside, and this is a function. So in React, the thing is a bit different. It's a bit different than Vue or Angular in that way, that we just don't have, we can have components as well as functions. Functions are basically, functional components are basically like, you don't change states over here. In Angular, you saw that we could change state anywhere. And normally in functional component, you give it something and it returns something, right? So we give it through props and it renders that in HTML file. So basically, this is a function. You can make it a component as well. That wouldn't be a problem. It should be working, but it's not a good practice. Like, if you can make a functional component, you can. Okay, so on change. So what's on change? So on change is an event, right? If the input is changing. So what should happen when the input is changing? So props.change is a method which I'm going to make right now, which should be a lot clearer. It is triggered when on change button, on changes event is happens over here. So a lot of things to uh, get input about, but still I think it'll be a lot clearer if let me make a container like work things in. No, so it should work. After this, it should be a lot easier to understand. So on props clicked, right? So what we did is, in Angular, what we did is on click method, we called inside a .ts file of that child, something happened and it was emitted. But in React, what we did is, it is a functional component, right? So in the functional component, the logic of this is written inside the parent. which it contains. So the clicked, it'll like tell what will happen if the button is clicked. And another thing is disabled, right? So props dot disabled. This is again sent from the parent. So what happened in Angular is a bit different in React. So everything is always set from the parent, which is called from it. So mostly in functional components we don't write much logics in it, and like it is a good practice to do this inside the parent and the parent itself. What's happening over here is I need to close this, right? Hopefully this should be made a lot clearer if we write the JS of it right now, right? Um, yes, right, right. So right now we are in our JS file, and what we need to do is make a state, right? So inside our app, in our Angular component, we had a state, right, inside our parent. Sorry, a to-dos inside our parent. So we need to write to-dos over here, which we are, if you go through this, if you see this image right now, it'll be a lot clearer. When we click something, we need to push it into our to-do list inside our parent, right? So these things need to be handled. And let me make another to property to do key to do input, and the to do input will have button disabled initially to true because it will be empty, right? So we need to disable that, and input text should be empty as well. We didn't need to do that in Angular, but in React we have to do that. And after that, what happened? Let's see. Like when the button is clicked, we need to have a clicked property sent to it, right? So let's make a HTML file for this right now, and like it's JSX to be exact, but let's just give it a class name of something to make it a lot neater, and a div class name of contain. I already know what the class name should be for that, but it might be like confusing for you that how he knows this. So you can go through the style sheet. And let's just delete that, right? And make that, and exactly h1 was to do app react gs with a capital S, of course, right? And let's just close this, and close the tag, and to do input was it, yeah. And now we need to write the properties, the props that needs to be sent disabled, and what should be disabled. For example, disabled is right over here. Disabled, where is it? Yeah, so disabled is right over here. So we need to send something to disabled. True or false is mainly disabled, but we need to send something to it. so property to it, otherwise it will throw an error. So this not state to do input button disabled. So initially it should be disabled. And what should happen when it is clicked? So the clicked over here, you can see that. Where is it? Right? Props dot clicked. It'll be a lot clearer. For example, the event is on click, and what happens when it is clicked. So we'll write that over here. Clicked is equal to this dot on save to do. So when it is clicked, we need to write a method over here which is not written right now, and I'll write it in a moment, and we'll do something, right? And changed. What happens when the text is changed? I need to write a method over here as well. This on input changed, right? Perfect. And let's just close this and and maybe add in the line something like uh, this, so look a lot nicer. And this is just a line. So what we need to do, we need to write on save to do method when the button is clicked, and on input changed when the input is changed, right? So let's write it. Yeah. And right. So let's write it before render method, and let's write on input change, and we'll write ES6 arrow function over here, and it'll give us an event, right? And that to get the text of that event, we need to write event.target.value, but first let's store it somewhere in a constant, so that otherwise we don't need to manipulate it. So it will be good practice. And if this current text is equal to, which is comparing the data type as well for it. So if it's empty, what we need to do is disable the button. So const current input is equal to button disabled true, and input text should be of event dot target dot value, right? So yeah, and in React you need to write set state to change the state of this. So what we need to do is change the state of this button disabled to, if it's not disabled then disable it if it's right. So exactly like that. So this dot state, and what's interesting about React is you need to do this immutably. It's a good practice that you do this immutably. You don't need to manipulate the set state directly. I mean, the values inside it, you need to give it a new value, right? So let's just move on, and hopefully it should be clear. I mean, if you want to read about set state, you can go through the documentation for it as well, and I'll like recommend you to do Redux as well. Is an important part for React. And what we did is made another object. For example, if it's empty, the button should be disabled. And if it's not empty, the button should not be disabled. The input inside it shouldn't be disabled, right? So this dot set state, and let's just change the state of to do input to current input. Right, so this was our logic for if the button is if the input text is changed, and we need another method for if on save to do is clicked. So when on save to do is clicked, we need to add an ES6 function with no parameters and const current text. So we can get the current text of that input by because the value is stored in the state, so it'll be easier to just get it from there, right? And let previous to do is equal. Now I'll use the spread operator over here because I want to change this immutably. So what the spread operator is this does is basically this to dos over here, it'll not give a reference or something like that, but another completely different object. uh, so if you change that in previous to do, it won't affect or state to do's, right? So I don't want to do that. So uh, immutably it will be like good thing to do. So current text and this dot set state to do's previous to do, right? So I guess that's it. It should be like working. We'll know. Let me just write. Okay, I don't think I'll be needing to do list over here right now because I'm not doing anything with it. But what this will do is save the input text, disable it. Let's just see it for now, right? We need to see it. Exactly. Awesome. Look, the disabled is changing. So when we click save to do, it'll save this input text inside of list of states to do's list, right? And then we'll do something about it. But for now, it's working. So let's do the same thing for view as well. So we'll check out what's the difference in like uh, view as well and find out the differences over here, right? So let's just go to do input view. If you want to go directly to a file, you can command P in Mac or control P in Windows, right? So let's just make a class of container to centralize this stuff. Also, I like centering things. Yeah, and we need to make an input same thing as before of type text, right? And a placeholder of enter to do yeah, to do, and a class of to do input, right? And what is happening over here right now? So in Angular we used ng model, in React we used value to bind to this, and in Vue we need vModel, right? So different things, different names, but almost the same thing. Almost, like not exactly the same, of course, because in Angular we use two-way data binding, in React we use one-way data binding, and in Vue we use two-way data binding as well. So that's why in React it's a bit different because one-way data binding works in a different way. If you want to know more about one-way, two-way, or data binding, mm, uh, let me know. I'll share a tutorial after this. So V on click. So V on and click. right? So what happens when a button save is clicked? Alright, on save to do, right? And make I'll call the method on save to do, and disabled is equal to do is equal to, and let's make it empty, and let's name it save to do, and an exclamation mark, because I like exclamation marks, right? And let's go through this, and right, and what happened in Angular is we wrote the methods for it inside our TS file, and it seemed a lot nicer, right? And we have nicer stuff over here as well, right? Of course we have. So what we need to do is, firstly we need to make property. For example, it is binded over here to do, so this needs to know what the property is of it. So in view, what we do is write data. It's in view, it's kind of like a JSON object, everything in the type, the logic of it, right? So return to do, and we write over here. So what we did in TypeScript, what in Angular, what we did in React, and what we are doing over here, they are a bit different, but the principles remain the same, right? On save to do, and what happens when we like in Angular we emitted an event, right? And the event was listened to it by the parent component. I mean, something happens, event binding, right? And we have the same thing over here as well, on to do, and we didn't need to make a output over here because view is much nicer that way. It looks a lot cleaner in my. So let's now change the, we are complete over here, and let's go to, and let's go over here, and what we need to do is, let's just delete this stuff, right? Don't like this stuff anymore. Let's just use Emmet. Can we use Emmet over here? Container. Yeah, we can. Of course we can, because we can. Emmet is a nice thing to have for making quick. For example, if I press tab right now, look, it's a lot fun using Emmet, coding in Emmet and doing stuff, because it'll make you a lot productive. Have view JS h1, right? And what we need to do over here right now is we import to do input is the name of that, and the emitter name was on to do add, and we need to write the same name over here as well, and we need to handle it, right? So handle that to do add. For example, we'll write some method in it. What we need to write is handle to do add, which will, let's make an HRS over here, because we need to be a bit consistent in our app, in our, right? So we'll write data over here as well. So yeah, data, return, and to-dos, we need to have more to-dos to be done. Return to-dos and methods, and methods should be what? Handle to do add, right? And to do. this dot to do's, let's just make it like bottom up. What's let's just make it that way because I like it that way. I like it that way. Yeah, to do's dot push. Um, let's push and to do, right? So I think everything seems to be looking fine. Let's see if it's working fine as well. Right, so what happened? I think it isn't saved because uh-huh. What's going on? What's going on? Silly me. Silly me. I wrote all this stuff in and this, but okay, I think we just need to copy this and copy that, right? And we need to add these things as well. So yeah, I think it should work then. It should work and we'll be ready to go on our next move. But let's just see if this should work. All right, perfect. Yeah, it's working, but let's just clean this up a bit. Oh no, let's just uh, all right, let's yeah, so it's working right now. What we did in this part is child parent communication some sort, right? So when the add to do is clicked, when it is clicked, what happens is the parent container pushes the to do input into this thing. Let's just